shooting that left 40-year-old Elise Wars and her 4-year-old daughter Corey Ashton dead in a Hagerstown hotel room. Detectives saying as the gunman was standing up, shot both victims in the head as they were lying down. There were no signs of a break-in or struggle. It's unclear if they were asleep.
He doesn't have a conscience. Anybody that takes the life of a 4-year-old innocent baby is a monster.
Police have since arrested 22-year-old Javon Hines. Several friends of the victim say the suspect was dating Wars for just over a month. One of the victim's best friends never even got to meet him.
People show you who they want you to see. If he showed her that he was a bad person, she wouldn't have allowed him around her daughter.
Court documents showed the mother and daughter were last captured alive on hotel surveillance cameras Monday night, 2 days before officers found their bodies. It says the suspect was carrying the little girl when they walked into the hotel room. Prosecutors say Hines was seen leaving the room 11 hours later, acting suspicious, wearing a mask, and removing items from the room using a luggage cart.
She reformatted her whole life around Corey. Everything that she did was for her.
In his court appearance Friday, Hines' public defender argues a lack of direct evidence tying him to the shooting. Family, friends, and officials are still trying to find out the motive. Tonight, with more questions, come more pain.
Ladies, don't trust these men with your kids.
And tonight, we know Hines will stay behind bars. Today, a judge denied his public defender's request to either set a high bond amount or release him to family to be under supervision. He faces multiple charges, including first-degree murder and first-degree assault.
November 2022, Hagerstown, Maryland. Inside a modest hotel room at the APM Inn and Suites, the lives of a mother and her little girl came to a violent end. 40-year-old Elise Wars and her 4-year-old daughter Corey Ashton were found dead. Both shot in the head, both discovered in their beds. Who could do this, and why? What unfolded in the hours before, and the shocking defense that would later surface in court, would leave a community shaken and searching for answers. We would like to express our deepest condolences to the family, friends, and loved ones of Elise Wars and her daughter, Corey Ashton. No words can fully ease the pain of such an unimaginable loss. Our hearts are with you during this time of profound grief. Hagerstown, Maryland, a small town nestled in the heart of Washington County, a place where life moves at its own pace, and the everyday feels ordinary. At the APM Inn and Suites, Elise Wars and her young daughter, Corey, had been living for several months. It was a quiet routine for them, nothing unusual about their stay. They kept to themselves, coming and going, settling into their temporary space like many others who passed through. Elise, a mother doing what she could to build a future for herself and Corey, had found a safe, if humble, refuge here. Corey, full of innocence, likely unaware of the tragic fate that awaited her, played with the small toys she had brought with her. For a while, it seemed like just another typical chapter in their lives, nothing to suggest the horror that would soon unfold. Elise Wars was 40 years old, a mother trying to build a life for herself and her daughter, Corey. Her story was like so many others, the story of a woman doing her best in the face of challenges. She wasn't wealthy or well-known, but she had hope. Elise wanted something better, something stable, for her daughter. She worked hard, quietly doing what she had to do to get by. She'd found a temporary home at the APM Inn and Suites, trying to make it work while she figured out the next step. Her life, though uncertain in many ways, was filled with love for Corey. And it was that love, more than anything, that kept her going. Corey Ashton, just 4 years old, was her world. A little girl with a bright smile and a curious nature. Corey was the light of Elise's life. She had a laugh that could brighten any room, and she saw the world through the eyes of someone still untainted by hardship. She was innocent, too young to understand the complexities of the world around her, too young to be burdened by its pain. Neighbors remembered Elise as a woman who always tried her best, even when things were tough. She wasn't loud or demanding. She was soft-spoken, gentle, and kind. A mother who kept to herself but carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. One neighbor recalled seeing Elise and Corey walking through the parking lot, hand in hand, and thought to themselves how much Elise loved her daughter. They seemed like any other family, trying to make it through, quietly existing, doing their best. It wasn't just Elise and Corey's close circle who felt their absence. Their lives, though short, touched everyone they met in some way, and now they were gone. The tragedy of their loss was felt deeply by those who knew them, and by those who never had the chance to know them at all. Then there was Javon Hines. At 22 years old, he was younger than Elise by nearly 2 decades, a significant gap that raised questions from the start. Their relationship, brief and fragile, was only a few weeks old. For Elise, it may have seemed like a new chapter, a chance for something fresh, perhaps even a sense of security. But for Javon, it was something altogether different. Friends of Elise described him as someone who seemed to come on strong at first. His charm was undeniable, but it didn't take long for those around him to sense that something wasn't right. Elise, despite her need for stability, had only just begun to get to know him. They didn't have the foundation that might have been built over time. Trust had not yet formed. Javon's unpredictable personality made it hard for others to make sense of him. One moment, he seemed attentive and caring, but the next he became distant or erratic. He was a man who didn't seem to know what he wanted, and worse, didn't know how to maintain any real connection. Elise, ever hopeful, may have believed things could work out, but the warning signs were there, though subtle. It was a relationship that lacked true depth. It was fragile. Some who knew him described Javon as someone who lacked impulse control. His behavior sometimes didn't align with the image he tried to project. He could be warm and kind one moment, but the next, his temper and lack of clear boundaries left people uneasy. And for Elise, trying to make a better life for herself and Corey, it was a relationship with more questions than answers. There was no history between them that could ground a bond. Their relationship was based on fleeting moments, never built on years of knowing each other or shared experiences. It was a chance that from the start seemed unlikely to last. Surveillance footage from that Monday night paints a haunting picture of what happened in those final moments. Elise and Corey can be seen entering the hotel room together, their movements unremarkable, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Corey, small and innocent, is carried in her mother's arms as they step into the room, the door closing softly behind them. It was a typical scene, a mother with her young daughter, just another evening spent in the hotel, without any hint of what was to come. But this quiet moment would be the last time they would be seen alive. Hours later, the footage shifts, showing Javon Hines moving through the hotel corridors. This time he is wearing a face mask, his movements hurried. He moves in and out of the room, carrying items, personal belongings, things that seemed important. What was he taking? Why the mask? Why the urgency? The timeline suggests that shortly after Elise and Corey entered the room, both were shot in the head, likely while they were still in bed, asleep. The calmness of their final hours, the unassuming nature of that evening, contrasted sharply with the brutal end that awaited them. By the time Hines is seen moving the items from the room, the deed had already been done. But the actions caught on camera raise more questions than answers. What was he hiding? Was he trying to cover his tracks, or was something more at play? The footage, cold and detached, only deepens the mystery. What drove him to commit such an act? What was he trying to erase or protect? Those answers remained locked away until he was finally arrested. Hours after the last footage of Hines leaving the hotel room, the scene inside remained undisturbed. It wasn't until the next morning that the hotel staff, alerted by the lack of activity, entered the room. What they found was not what anyone could have expected. Elise Wars and her daughter, Corey, lay in their beds. At first glance, it appeared as though they were simply asleep, peaceful, undisturbed. The room, otherwise calm and ordinary, made it all the more unsettling. But this was no ordinary scene. The victims had been executed. Both Elise and Corey had suffered gunshot wounds to the head. The shots had been deliberate, precise, leaving no doubt in the minds of investigators that this was no random act of violence. The position of the bodies, lying in their beds, indicated that they hadn't had a chance to defend themselves, hadn't even been aware of the danger before it struck. It was an execution-style killing, cold, calculated. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. A town known for its quiet, peaceful atmosphere was now grappling with the brutal loss of 2 lives. Friends and neighbors could hardly believe the news. Elise, a mother simply trying to build a better future for herself and her daughter, and Corey, a young child with so much ahead of her, had been taken from them without warning. People who had passed by the hotel every day, who had seen Elise and Corey in the parking lot, in the halls, were now forced to come to terms with the brutal reality. A family had been lost in the most violent way imaginable. As news of the horrific deaths of Elise and Corey spread, the police began their search for answers. The first step was to gather the evidence they had available. The surveillance footage. It was there, captured on camera, that the first clues emerged. The footage showed Elise and Corey entering their hotel room, completely unaware of the tragedy that awaited them. It also revealed the last person to be with them, Javon Hines. The footage painted a clear picture of his movements. After entering the room with the mother and daughter, Hines was seen leaving hours later, his actions seemingly rushed and suspicious. The police immediately focused their attention on him. As the investigation continued, the authorities acted swiftly. A manhunt was launched. The search for Hines took police to Elkridge, Maryland, a Baltimore suburb. There, just a short time after the murders, he was found and arrested. Hines's arrest marked a turning point in the case. He was charged with first-degree murder and second-degree murder for the deaths of Elise and Corey. Along with those charges, he was also charged with first-degree assault and reckless endangerment. It was clear that the police were confident in their case, and the arrest brought a sense of resolution to the immediate investigation. But even with the arrest, many questions remained. Why did it happen? What was his motive? And, perhaps most haunting of all, how could someone so young, so new in Elise's life, commit such an unforgivable act? Javon Hines was just 22 years old. Young, impulsive, and someone whose life had only recently intersected with Elise's. Their relationship, brief and fragile, had only lasted a few weeks. But in that short time, something had gone terribly wrong. The questions surrounding Hines's connection with Elise were troubling, not just because of the suddenness of their bond, but because of the lack of foundation. There was little trust and even less history between them. And yet, something had pushed him to do the unthinkable. Hines wasn't a stranger to the area. His background was far from spotless, though little was publicly known about his personal life before he crossed paths with Elise. What was clear, however, was his unpredictable nature. Those who knew him, even in passing, began to share their stories. It wasn't long before his true character started to surface. Neighbors who had seen him around described him as a man who lacked depth. They recalled his cold demeanor, his inability to connect in a genuine way with those around him. Elise, they said, had been desperate for stability, and it seemed that Hines, a stranger really, had been the wrong person to place her trust in. One neighbor, reflecting on their brief interactions, noted how unsettling it was to watch him with Elise. They remembered how detached he seemed, as if he didn't care about her or her daughter at all. He came and went, showing no real affection, no real commitment to anything. His presence in her life was fleeting and shallow. It wasn't just the neighbors who noticed his coldness. Friends of Elise began to speak out as well. They all described the same unsettling pattern. Hines lacked a conscience, a sense of right and wrong that anyone could rely on. He was unpredictable. One moment, he seemed like he could be trusted. The next, he was a different person entirely. And then came the public outrage. The murder of a mother and her young daughter, someone they knew and cared about, left the community reeling. The reaction to Hines's actions was swift and unforgiving. As one local resident put it, anyone who kills a child is a monster. There was no other way to describe it. The anger and heartbreak that followed were palpable. The grief of losing two innocent lives, especially a child, was more than the community could bear. Hines had not only taken the lives of Elise and Corey, he had stolen a sense of safety from everyone who knew them. Javon Hines's arrest was just the beginning of a long and unsettling journey through the justice system. Initially, he pleaded not guilty to the charges. The courtroom, filled with the weight of grief from the victims' families and the public, waited for answers. But what came next was a twist that no one expected. As we move through this case, I want you to put yourself in the jury box for a moment. Imagine you're sitting there, tasked with making one of the most important decisions of all. If you were the juror, would you accept the insanity defense? It's a complex question, one that doesn't have a simple answer. Could someone suffering from a mental illness really be held responsible for committing such a horrific act? Or does the condition change everything about how we view their actions? Now, take a step back and think about the bigger picture. If Javon Hines is found not guilty by reason of insanity, he could potentially avoid spending any time in prison. Instead, he might be sent to a psychiatric facility for treatment. It's a legal process that is intended to ensure the person gets the help they need. But that raises another question. Is that justice? Would justice truly be served if he didn't face the consequences of his actions in the same way someone else might? Can we accept that someone who has taken the lives of two innocent people, one of whom was just a child, could avoid punishment simply because they were mentally ill at the time of the crime? Or would it be more just to ensure that Hines receives treatment, but in a way that reflects the severity of his actions, ensuring that he spends the rest of his life in a psychiatric facility where he cannot harm others? It's a moral dilemma that touches on some of the toughest questions in our justice system. How do we balance the need for accountability with compassion for someone who is mentally ill? Is there a right answer, or does the situation demand us to find some middle ground? I want you to take a moment to think about all of this. How would you decide if you were sitting on that jury? Would you accept the insanity defense, or would you demand a different form of justice? And perhaps most importantly, do you think justice can ever truly be served for a mother and daughter who were taken so suddenly and so violently? Take a moment to reflect on your thoughts. We really want to hear from you in the comments below. What do you think about the balance between justice and mental health? Your opinions truly matter, and they can help shape the conversation surrounding this case and many others like it. So take a second, leave your thoughts, and let's continue this discussion together. Elise Wars and her 4-year-old daughter, Corey, were like any other family, filled with hopes and dreams, trying to build a future one step at a time. Their journey was simple, yet full of purpose. A mother working tirelessly to create a stable life for her child, wanting only to provide her daughter with the safety and security every parent wishes for. And Corey, just 4 years old, had the entire world ahead of her. A little girl who should have had the chance to grow, to learn and to experience life in all its beauty. Her innocence, her laughter, and her boundless curiosity were all things that no one could take away from her. But in the blink of an eye, everything was stolen from them. The life they were building together was shattered, not by some random accident, but by the cold, deliberate actions of someone who should have been a protector in their lives. A man who, in his moments of unchecked rage and thoughtlessness, took it all away. The tragedy that unfolded inside that hotel room left a hole that will never be filled. A mother and her child, both gone far too soon, taken by someone they had trusted. Their deaths were not just the loss of two lives, it was the destruction of dreams, of hopes for the future, of everything they had worked so hard to create. The pain of their loss is something that stretches far beyond their immediate family. It's felt by friends, neighbors, and even by those who only came to know them through the aftermath. Elise and Corey's lives, brief as they were, left an indelible mark on everyone who crossed their path. And now they are gone. As the case moves toward its uncertain and inevitable end, we are left to wonder, how can we ever truly find justice for a mother and child who were taken so violently, so unexpectedly? The questions linger in our minds. Can anything truly make up for the depth of their loss? Is there a punishment severe enough to right such a wrong? Or perhaps, does the answer lie somewhere deeper, somewhere the law cannot reach? A place where the hurt of what was lost cannot be healed by any sentence or verdict. We are left with the cold reality that no matter what happens next in the courtroom, no matter what the verdict may be, Elise and Corey will never come back. There is no law, no punishment, no ruling that can ever undo the pain felt by those who loved them. The questions we are left with now are not just about what is fair or just. They are questions about how we, as a society, deal with loss, with justice, and with the darkness that can sometimes infiltrate lives in ways we never see coming. So, what is justice truly? Can there be a punishment that truly fits the crime in a case like this? Or are we, as humans, left searching for something deeper? Something that cannot be found in the confines of a courtroom, but rather in our hearts and in our understanding of the pain this loss has caused. Elise and Corey will never get their chance to continue their journey, and as we reflect on their story, we are forced to confront the haunting question: what is the cost of a life taken too soon, and can we ever truly pay it back?